Hello and welcome to Between the Lines, the podcast that dives deep into the stories redefining Asia-Pacific's reinsurance landscape. Recorded here in the newsrooms of InsuranceAsia News in Hong Kong. I'm Mithun Varkey, Editor-in-Chief for InsuranceAsia News. And in this episode, we'll do a roundup of the NatCat events in the past 2 weeks, as well as look into the ICA report on Australia's cat experience, Japan's offshore wind market taking flight, DB's acquisition of US carrier Fortegra, and the big Lloyd's Asia exit. We'll also bring you insights into the stories that the team is working on. Our special guest for this episode, Stephen Wares, is the head of international underwriting for Cyber Specialist Coalition. In this interview with Aidan Gregory, Wares discusses the latest developments in the cyber market and the opportunities in APAC, as well as the MGA's regional expansion plans.
We call ourselves an active insurer, which means that throughout the policy year, we provide the insured with an attack surface monitoring platform that monitors their exposure to certain vulnerabilities and reports that back to them. We will alert them to any critical vulnerabilities that we see during the year. We will remind them to fix those vulnerabilities, so we will follow up on that. For us, insurance isn't just about providing that PDF and that financial support, although that's obviously a very important part of it. It's about preventing cyber attacks in the first place.
I have with me today the whole team, and we're all back in the office. Deputy Editor Andrew Mullen, Senior Correspondent Aidan Gregory, reporter Joana Nguyen. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Mithun. It's nice to be back.
Let's get cracking. It's been a pretty busy week from a cat perspective in the region. As we were discussing at the last episode, we were in the thick of Typhoon Ragasa. After Ragasa passed, we saw another typhoon hit Vietnam, Typhoon Boloi. We also had an earthquake in the Philippines. Andrew, can you give us an update on how these events have impacted the region?
Yes, after recording the last podcast in our bedrooms at home, we emerged that afternoon, that evening, and there was a lot of trees down in Hong Kong, but I think overall the losses for Ragasa weren't as bad as first feared. There was a lot of videos online of restaurants being inundated and a lot of flooding in terms of some shorefront properties, but overall the economic losses are not as worse as feared. They're estimated to be around or as high as $386 million US, but this is around half the damage caused by Typhoon Mangkhut in 2018. Ragasa slammed into Hong Kong, Taiwan and Macau at the end of September, unleashing hurricane-force winds, widespread reports of flooding, commercial establishments, with Aeon's cat report putting the strongest storm of the year expected to bring hundreds of millions of dollars of economic losses and tens of millions of dollars of insured losses. But like I said before, not as worse as initially feared. In terms of the Philippines, that earthquake was a magnitude 6.9 earthquake that struck Cebu province in the central Philippines on September 30th. This unfortunately resulted in 72 deaths and affected over 500,000 people, according to the National Disaster Centre. This was their latest figures from Monday this week. 559 people were injured after the 5-kilometre depth offshore quake hit the region just before 10 p.m. on that evening. And that also caused some widespread damage to infrastructure, homes, businesses. And we're waiting to hear in terms of figures on that. But that's the latest we have on the Philippines. Joanna, obviously, Typhoon Boloi was a bit closer to home for you, literally.
Yes, so Boloi was my major focus last week as it brought quite significant damage to Vietnam. So far, economic losses are estimated at $625 million US, and insured losses are roughly $13.5 million US. So, like 2% of the economic losses. And most of that are paid by non-life carriers. Biggest loss till now is at the Vũng Áng 2 thermal power plant, as its coal warehouse collapsed when the storm hit Vietnam. This is expected to cost $20 million US for insurers with BI and property claims. PVI, which is Vietnam's largest non-life carrier, is the lead insurer, while Star is the lead reinsurer of the plant's facultative reinsurance plan. Lloyd Warwick International, a McLaren's company, has been appointed as the loss adjusters. Aside from that, Boloi has also led to extensive flooding in several areas in northern Vietnam, including the Hanoi capital. And then this week, we also had Typhoon Matmo, which also resulted in another flooding due to its heavy rain. So we could expect some claims arising from that as well.
Thanks, Joanna. I mean, the typhoons are a stark reminder of Asia's challenges with climate change. What's interesting is that while Typhoon Ragasa was the strongest wind this year. The losses seem to have come from Typhoon Borloy, which is isn't as strong as Typhoon Regasa. And it's often not the wind speed, but the flooding that causes the losses, which is quite an interesting reminder. Andrew, you had a story on Australia's cat experience the past year based on a report from the Insurance Council of Australia. Can you fill us in?
Yeah, this report showed Australia's insurance losses to date decreased by 25% from $1.7 billion in 23-24 to $1.3 billion in 24-25. This is, as you said, Mithun, according to the Insurance Council of Australia. However, claim numbers were much closer year on year, falling by only 7% to date, from 163,000 related to extreme weather to 154,000. Declared events over the 12 months to June the 30th included one cyclone, which is Tropical Cyclone Alfred, and two major flooding events, which were the North Queensland floods and the mid-North Coast and Hunter floods. According to the Insurance Council of Australia's cat resilience report, insured losses from ex-Tropical Cyclone Alfred were close to $1 billion, followed by much smaller losses from the North Queensland floods and the mid-North Coast and Hunter floods.
I mean, as we were discussing earlier today, it's been a busy week for ARPC as well. They had some reports out on the impact of these losses on their overall performance. What did ARPC have to say?
Yeah, obviously, for the size of Tropical Cyclone Alfred and the impact it had, it does occur in a lot of these reports. So the ARPC overall said it suffered an operating deficit of $587 million during 24-25, and this was due to the large scale of ex-Tropical Cyclone Alfred. But the RPC stressed that it's in a strong financial position and is operating as it's supposed to under the terms of the legislation. The RPC, though, stressed that it remains in a strong financial position and is operating within the legislation. A few days before this report, it had mentioned that 90% of its claims since it started a few years ago all related to Tropical Cyclone Alfred. So that just puts into perspective the size of Tropical Cyclone Alfred had on the insurance industry in Australia.
Thanks, Andrew. The other big news story this past week was the announcement that Lloyd's Regional Director for Asia Pacific, Chris McKinnon, is leaving Lloyd's in April 2026 to pursue new opportunities after over a decade of working for the firm in Australia and Singapore. McKinnon had taken over this role earlier this year for succeeding Ian Ferguson, who had the role for about 7 years. McKinnon's been at Lloyd's a long time. He's been there for nearly a decade, starting off in Australia. He was a regional head for Australia and New Zealand before taking on expanded responsibility for what they call the APMEA region, which is Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. It's not entirely clear what Chris is going to do after. They've not made any announcements or they have not announced any person to succeed McKinnon. But it's been quite a busy year for Lloyd's, both in terms of performance and in terms of changes at the leadership level. McKinnon's looming departure sort of leaves a key vacancy, overseeing an important source of premium growth for Lloyd's globally. We've seen sort of a bit of a turn at the top level in Lloyd's in the past couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see who's coming in to fill in McKinnon's shoes. Moving on, Aidan, you had an interesting chat last week with the Japanese offshore wind underwriters. It seems like the Japanese market is at a bit of a turning point. Tell us what's happening in the Japan offshore wind market.
Sure. So we sat down with Tokyo Marine's head of marine hull and energy, Hiro Ishijima, to discuss the development of Japan's offshore wind industry. Japan famously has very few natural resources, but what Japan does have is an abundance of coastline and plenty of wind. So the Japanese government has identified the offshore wind industry as sort of critical plank of the country's efforts to achieve net zero by the middle of this century. But building wind farms in Japan's waters is certainly not without its challenges. Given the elevated NatCat risk that Japan faces, which includes typhoons, earthquakes, and tsunamis. So this means that a lot of the wind farms have to be built off the coast of Japan, have to be built with special technologies, and that brings with it much more complicated risks for insurers. So in our conversation with Ishijima last week, we talked about the challenges of developing this industry and its importance to Japan's economy and Japan's efforts to decarbonize. Japan has a target to reach 30 to 45 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2040. And to meet this target, there is a need for greater reinsurance capacity from the international market to backstop all of these projects that are being auctioned off by the Japanese government.
There are lots of opportunities in the Japanese market. Talking about Japan, Joana, we had a report on MS&AD doing some rebranding earlier this week. What's the plans for MS&AD?
Right. So MS&AD Insurance Group will change its name to Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance Group, subject to the approval of shareholders, meetings, and relevant authorities. And that's not the only change. So, like earlier in March, MS&AD announced that it would merge its two core domestic P&C arms, Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance, or MSI, and Aoi Nisei Dowa Insurance, or ADI, into one, creating the largest non-life carrier in Japan. So this combined entity will be named as Mitsui Sumitomo Aoi Insurance. So, it's based on the existing brand built together with the strong customer base of MSI and ADI, minimizing the risk of misunderstanding or concern on the part of customers. And another subsidiary of MS&AD Holdings, Mitsui Direct General Insurance, will also be changed to Mitsui Sumitomo Direct General Insurance. So all these changes will be effective after April 1st, 2027. So you can see all these new names will start with Mitsui Sumitomo. And MS&AD said that they wanted to create a unified brand, demonstrating the strength of the group management.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of changes happening around the Japanese insurers. They're all being very acquisitive. And as we, in a conversation earlier this week with one of the reinsurance brokers, there seems to be a concern among both Japanese and Korean insurers about growth, and they are desperately looking for new avenues of growth. And last week we did see DB Insurance, one of the biggest insurers in Korea. They've signed an agreement to acquire 100% of U.S. specialty carrier Fortegra. The Florida-based Fortegra is a subsidiary of Tiptree and is approximately 24% owned by private equity firm Warburg Pincus, both of which will get an exit as part of the deal. The acquisition is expected to complete in mid-2026. The acquisition is expected to provide DB Insurance with a platform for global growth, especially in a large market like the US, and gives it an entry into very profitable sectors like surety and warranty sectors. Fortegra had a premium income of $3 billion and a net profit of $140 million last year. So quite an interesting deal for DB Insurance, and really speaks to their global expansion plans.
I mean, it's with the Japanese as well in their global expansion. This is a big step for the Koreans in terms of their global presence as well, right?
Yeah, so this is the second deal this year by a Korean insurer, right? I mean, we've seen Samsung Fire and Marine increase its stake in Canopius, which is a Lloyd's specialty reinsurer. And I mean, what's interesting about that is, there's some numbers out recently about the Canopius deal. I think Samsung Fire and Marine paid $850 million in June to become the second largest shareholder of Canopius. We've been talking about the Korean and Japanese insurers going out to buy companies and looking for expansion. We've seen some of the Koreans go into markets like Vietnam, Indonesia, but we haven't really seen big ticket, large scale M&A. These two deals this year shows us that it's going to be more. It's going to be the Koreans are going to make big acquisitions, just like the Japanese are. So there'll be interesting times for Asian carriers. There's likely to be more deals in the making. Aidan, talking about global expansion, you also spoke to Mapfre CEO recently. He had some interesting insights into their plans for the region. Can you tell us more?
So I sat down with Javier Sanchez here, who is the APAC leader for Mapfre Re, the Spanish reinsurer. Mapfre Re has ambitious growth plans for APAC. They have been actively looking to expand in the region, particularly in China and India, which they've identified as a top priority for the firm, alongside rebalancing their portfolio towards life. They already write a large amount of property cat business, but they're looking to do more in the life space. So Mapfre told us that they want to reach €1 billion of premium in Asia as soon as possible, and they recently opened an office in Beijing as part of the efforts to achieve that target. Their APAC gross written premium currently stands at around €700 million, which doesn't take into account the Australian business, which is housed in a different part of Mapfre.
So it doesn't look like they're far away from that €1 billion milestone. Aidan, next week you're going to be in Singapore for our cyber conference. What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to being back in the Lion City. It'll be the first time I've visited for over 6 years, and I'm traveling to Singapore to attend InsuranceAsia News APAC cyber conference. The timing of the conference is really interesting, and given the high-profile cyber attacks that we've seen on Jaguar Land Rover in the UK and Ozai in Japan over the past few weeks, which have both been very serious. In the case of Jaguar Land Rover, the luxury car maker has been forced to go to the UK government for assistance, given the concerns about the impact that the shutdown will have on its suppliers and on manufacturing jobs in the UK. And the Ozai cyber attack was very bad news for Hong Kong's drinkers, given that it stopped production of super dry for much of last week. And when you speak to market sources, these major cyber attacks on high profile blue chip companies really kind of reinforce the message, that corporates really, really do need to insure themselves against these kind of events, just given the scale of the disruption and the financial losses that, can be involved in the event of a serious breach like the ones we've seen in recent weeks. So at the start, it's an interesting time for this conference to be happening. And, we've lined up a number of interesting interviews ahead of the event next week. So keep an eye out for some of the informative cyber content from us that will be coming out over the next fortnight.
Great. Thanks, Aidan. I'm pretty sure there'll be quite a lot of interesting stories from the conference and a lot of interesting conversations. Hope you enjoy it. Well, moving on to the stories that we're working on. I know there's been a few disruptions with public holidays, etc. But Joana, what's keeping you busy?
So a few days ago, we had a chat with Macau's managing director for Greater China, Chelsea Jiang. She shared with us about how they wanted to be the leader in specialty insurance, especially marine and as well as AI-related coverage, because, China is the leading player in AI as well as logistics globally. And this year also marks their 10 years anniversary since its Chinese operation was set up in Shanghai. They are aiming to be the largest syndicate on the Lloyd's China platform by the end of this year. And she also shared a lot about insights in the recent marine pool set up by Hong Kong, as well as Hong Kong's attempt to develop the low-altitude economy insurance. There's a lot of interesting parts in this story that I want to unpack, and stay tuned.
Great. Looking forward to that story. On my end, I've got an interesting interview lined up. I'm speaking to Rohan Bapu, who's the new CEO of Howden Asia. Rohan Bapu used to be the CEO of Marsh Hong Kong, and he switched to Howden earlier this year, and he officially took charge as the regional CEO on the 1st of October. So I'm sitting down with him later this week to talk about his vision for Howden and the broader growth plans in the region. I think that'll be quite an interesting story. It's going to be quite a busy period for all of us as we prepare for the big Singapore International Reinsurance Conference, where we'll be doing a conference daily. So there's a lot of interviews lined up, a lot of meetings as we go into the conference and at the conference. We'll bring you the cutting edge of the renewal season. Meanwhile, it's Mid-Autumn Festival in Hong Kong, so let's have a few mooncakes and get back to work. Thank you, guys. In this episode, we have a very special guest joining us, Stephen Wares, who is the head of international underwriting for Cyber Specialist Coalition. Wares joins us from London, been spearheading Coalition's cyber products and its global expansion. Aidan Gregory interviews Stephen Ware about the cyber market, the broader trends in the industry, as well as the MGA's Asian expansion plans. It promises to be a really interesting conversation. Tune in.
it's quite a timely moment for us to be having this conversation, particularly given the large scale cyber attacks that have happened in recent weeks on companies such as Jaguar Land Rover and Asahi. What kind of impact, are these very high profile events involving blue chip companies having on the cyber insurance market?
It's having a huge impact on people's lives, real life. So these are companies that are incurring potentially devastating losses from those cyber attacks. And that's trickling down through the supply chain. In the case of JLR, there are 120,000 people employed in that supply chain. The impact on them is pretty significant. So first of all, our hearts go out to the individuals that are affected and the businesses that are affected. In terms of the impact on the cyber insurance market, these are the types of losses that, quite frankly, are expected. So they will not have an impact on the insurance market in terms of changes in pricing or terms or coverage necessarily. These are losses that are large but not unusual for the cyber insurance market.
These events are very serious, as you say, and there's lots of jobs, and there's a lot at stake when these attacks happen on companies. When these events happen, is it kind of having a noticeable impact on the way that your clients are thinking about cybersecurity and how they insure themselves against these risks?
Yes, it certainly is. The very public nature of some of these events, the press coverage of JLR, Asahi, Qantas, and others, Marks and Spencer's here in the UK, for example, has really spurred demand for cyber insurance. And that's not just amongst the larger companies. That's very much at the SME level as well. We've certainly seen with JLR the impact on their supply chain, a lot of very small suppliers being impacted by this cyber event. It certainly highlights to them the potentially business ruining impact this type of scenario can have. So I think it's opened quite a few eyes, and we've certainly seen an increase in demand from certain industries as a result of some of these attacks. But it's fair to say that penetration in cyber insurance is still quite low. Most insurance brokers will tell you that of their SME clients, probably less than 10% still buy cyber insurance, and that's here in the UK as well. So there's a long way to go to convince everybody that this is an insurance class worth purchasing, but it certainly is, and some of these events certainly help to highlight that, unfortunately.
Yes, it's certainly a bit of a strange paradox, particularly given high profile and reputationally damaging many of these cyber attacks are, that there is that kind of underpenetration of the cyber insurance market, and particularly here in Asia Pacific. Do you think there are any kind of particular reasons for why the adoption of the market has historically lagged behind, or is it just a kind of general thing around the world that, the nature of these risks are, very fast moving and very new in sort of the context of the broader insurance market?
I think that is true. This is a relatively new class in comparison with some other more traditional lines of business. That said, I've been associated with this class of insurance since 1998. So it has been around a lot longer than people think, and it has reached a stage of maturity. The cyber insurance market really took off when breach notification law came into place in the USA. Which meant you had to notify individuals if their data was stolen. That was around the early 2000s, and that really boosted the cyber insurance market and gave it the platform that led to the development of that market to what it is today. But privacy law has caught up around the world. And so I'm aware that within Asia, there is new privacy law being brought in. It's very similar to GDPR, for example. It has taken some time for that to catch up, and in the meantime, hackers have moved on from pure theft of data to more ransomware type events, which of course impact anybody anywhere in the world. So Asia has lagged behind. Of the global insurance market, I think Asia's accounting for around 8%, or perhaps $1.2 billion. That just shows that there's a very long way to go in terms of market penetration. That's certainly a great opportunity for insurers. But also a lot of very uninsured and very vulnerable businesses out there that could do with the protection that cyber insurance provides.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like there is a pretty significant growth opportunity for carriers in cyber here in Asia Pacific as a result of the two trends that you just outlined. Could you outline, how Coalition is looking to grow in Asia Pacific? The Australia business has had a strong start, particularly since its launch in 2023.
I think the first thing to say is that Coalition is the world's first active cyber insurer. We don't just hand out a 30-page PDF for someone to stick in a drawer and that be the end of it until and if they have a claim. We call ourselves an active insurer, which means that throughout the policy year, we provide the insured with an attack surface monitoring platform that monitors their exposure to certain vulnerabilities and reports that back to them. We will alert them to any critical vulnerabilities that we see during the year. We will remind them to fix those vulnerabilities, so we will follow up on that. So for us, insurance isn't just about providing that PDF and that financial support, although that's obviously a very important part of it. It's about preventing cyber attacks in the first place. It seems to be working. So we have, in the USA, the data shows that we have 73% less claims than our competition. So clearly that benefits us as an insurer, but massively benefits our insured. So that's what we're bringing into the Asian market. That's what we're bringing to the Australian market, that active cyber insurance approach. We run our incident response through a Coalition incident response company. So we do that in-house as well. And that combination of having that insight into our company's vulnerability profile combined with our ability to respond to incidents does mean that we're able to deploy very rapidly. In fact, we fix most of around 50% of the incidents without any cost to the insured. So Coalition are all about trying to solve cyber risk rather than just insure cyber risk. We do provide other security products as well. So we do provide an MDR service. We provide security training. We provide the Coalition Incident Response Company to help resolve any incidents that may occur. So it is more of a complete solution than simply a PDF and an insurance policy.
Almost by definition, the nature of these cyber attacks on companies are very, very complex, and they touch on all kinds of different areas, such as legal, financial, and it sounds very much like prevention, like very much is the cure. And by the time you've had a damaging breach, it's sort of already too late. What can companies do in the event of having a breach to mitigate the damage?
To be honest, buy cyber insurance would be my top recommendation. To be able to rapidly respond to the cyber incident is key. And for most small and mid-sized companies, that's quite challenging in that they don't have generally ready access to the types of vendor panel that Coalition would be able to deploy very quickly to help them with things like a forensic investigation of exactly what's happened, specialist legal advice relating to the data that's been stolen. And so to be able to deploy that type of expertise very rapidly is extremely important. Coalition respond to claims within minutes, and we're able to deploy that type of expertise extremely quickly. So if companies are not going to buy cyber insurance, then they should certainly have an incident response plan. They should know who they're going to contact in the event of an incident. They should be able to convene the key decision makers within their company very quickly to be able to deal with that incident. But certainly cyber insurance and the people that we can deploy could be a very substantial part of that. We see what happens with companies that we insure, obviously, but we also see what happens with companies that we don't insure that have applied to us in the past and have decided to not insure with Coalition. And so, for example, in 2024, we had 614 companies that we notified of a critical security issue because we could see it through our attack surface monitoring platform. They chose not to insure or to fix the issue and went on to have a cyber incident. And we estimate that would have cost around $307 million US dollars. according to the data that we can gather publicly and through our own loss simulations. So certainly insurance can be a major part of the solution.
It seems like the threat landscape is constantly evolving within the cyberspace. Are there any kind of new threats that you're concerned about at the moment, particularly when it comes to the rollout of AI in companies? Are you concerned about kind of potential losses and breaches that are resulting from the implementation of AI technology?
Certainly, as always with new technologies, it can become an arms race between those who defend and those who attack. But actually, our concerns right now are a lot more simple. So if we look at the hacking groups that are very active at the moment, the Scattered Spider, for example, we're seeing them use social engineering techniques to great effect. So they are trying to steal credentials from employees through social engineering, and that is proving to be a very productive method of attacking these companies. So to a certain extent, it's a little bit of old school social engineering attacks that are proving to be the problem. But AI can play a part in that in terms of production of deep fakes to impersonate CEOs or other executives to try to convince people to hand over credentials. So yeah, maybe a combination of the two.
It's certainly very worrying, and we all think that we won't fall for these kinds of phishing attempts. But then in the age of AI, it's often difficult to distinguish between what is real and what isn't. So it's very concerning, and I'm sure it's it's just as concerning for the cyber insurance market as it is for the general public.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very concerning, and particularly for SMEs. So whilst the headlines all go to Jaguar Land Rover and Asahi and Qantas and Marks and Spencers, actually these are large companies. They will survive. But for SMEs, what can seem relatively small amounts of money can be devastating and shut down businesses. So coalition data, for example, shows that for micro companies, our average loss is around $79,000 US. For SMEs, it's around $140,000, and for those earning more than 100 million, it's around $228,000. Now, for those micro companies, for example, $79,000 loss might be the difference between shutting the doors to your business or staying open. So cyber insurance, I would say, is even more important for the smaller businesses than for the larger businesses. There has never been a better time to buy cyber insurance. It is far easier to apply for than it's ever been. I think sometimes long questionnaires can put companies off, but companies like Coalition collect a huge amount of data through our scanning technologies. And so we really don't need to ask very much of our insureds in order to get insurance. Prices have come down significantly since the height of 2022. And so I think the smallest premium that we have quoted or bound a company for, it was around £62 in the UK, and that's a single contractor who was able to buy £25,000 of cover. So it's extremely affordable. And when you compare that against something like mobile phone insurance, perhaps you'll pay $10 a month for mobile phone insurance and think that that's good value, but actually we might be able to charge even less for £25,000 euros of cyber insurance, and that's got to be good value.
Yeah, the capacity issue in the cyber market is quite interesting, as you say, given the changes that we've seen since 2019, when there was that wave of very expensive ransomware attacks that did leads some pretty significant claims for insurers back then.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and that really changed the market, and it moved us from primarily dealing with privacy incidents to ransomware incidents, and that meant that insurers had to change their rating models and charge prices that were appropriate for that new environment. So that did mean that there was a significant increase in price at that time, but those prices have dropped significantly since 2022. So now is a good time to jump onto cyber insurance if you haven't already.
How is the cyber insurance market working on solutions to insure companies when they have cyber attacks, not on them, but on companies in their supply chain?
Yeah, very good question, Aidan. We are able to deal with that currently. Cyber insurance is there primarily to insure cyber attacks against the insured company, but it can also insure cyber attacks against critical suppliers to our insured company and the impact on our insured company arising from that attack. So certainly that is an extension to the cover that is available from Coalition. Yes, it is very possible to insure that risk.
At the moment, there's no requirement in the UK to do that on a mandatory basis, right? When you transact with a supplier, do you think, in the future, after this crisis, we could see it becoming more of a mandatory requirement written into contracts that your supplier must have cyber insurance?
I think contractually that's absolutely right. And we're certainly seeing more of that already, that cyber insurance has become a contractual requirement through supply chains. We haven't seen any moves from government to make cyber insurance a mandatory class, and that's not something that we're expecting.
It's a fascinating corner of insurance market. It seems like it has a very, very long way to run yet in terms of its growth and sophistication.
Yes, it does. There's a long road to insure all of the companies that are out there. It's a complex class of insurance. Our insurance policy has 24 insuring clauses. So I would just say get the help of an expert insurance broker if you want to know what you can be insured for. There are a lot of really great insurance brokers that are helping market Coalition's product in the places that we sell it. So yes, please get some help of an expert insurance advisor. The global claims frequency for us for cyber insurance is around 1.5%. This is a real threat, and I think it's certainly something that's well worth insuring.
Thanks very much. It's been really interesting to listen to your responses.
You're welcome.
That's all from us in this episode of Between the Lines. We'll be back again in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you can connect with us on LinkedIn and make sure you're subscribed to our daily and weekly newsletters delivered straight to your inbox. Of course, we'd love to hear your feedback on the podcast. Email us at editorial@insuranceasianews.com. I'm Mithun Varkey. Thanks for listening.